Okay. Hello. I am so sorry for being a minute. Actually, I'm about 4 minutes late, aren't I? Woof. I hate to admit that, but there it is nonetheless. Thank you for coming. I'm so happy you're here. We are, as you probably know, finishing the book. So today's the day. um, if you have any questions, you certainly can ask at the end. Otherwise, we are just going to read straight through. Um, of course, starting now because we were a little bit late. So let's get started. Oop, there's my bra. Hello, you don't want to see that, do you? Okay, and tucking that down in. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I had to go get my kid. So I am a little bit later and I'm a little bit all over the place. But here we are. This is going to be exciting. We're going to take it easy and enjoy ourselves. So as you probably remember from last time, Jarek found out that Thomas was courting is not the right word, but stalking Cy. So that's where we are, and that's where we're going to start off now. So chapter 47. I gripped the railing with my free hand. Jarek looked as calm as spring day as he pulled me down the wide steps that snaked forever downward. The wood burned my palm as I gripped the railing. I winced. You're quite special, you know that, Miss Vanguard? It's been a millennia since I've been surprised by anyone's actions. Yet here you have surprised me every time. How do they say, I turn around? He said as he pulled me with more force. My grip slipped. He dragged me a couple steps before I caught hold again. It could have been considered a compliment, but I was past accepting any of his pretty words. He continued on as if we weren't literally in a tug of war where I was the prize. Look at that strength of yours. Quite impressive for a little fairy. He pulled again, and this time there was no stopping him as he twisted my arm, pushed it behind my back, and propelled me forward. Then he casually continued. First of all, your spirit. It's unlike anything I've ever seen of your kind. You don't cower. You fight. It's admirable. In another life, I could see you making a very good vampire. It's no wonder my nephew fell for you the way he did. The mention of Sven was a punch to the gut. Tears welled in my eyes. I'd never see him again, never kiss him, never tell him I loved him. I bit my lip to keep the tears from sliding down my cheeks. I had to get it together, or there would be a whole lot more people I'd never see again. Jarek continued on as if we were having tea time conversation, and I apologized for Thomas. The past couple months, he has come into some difficulties with fairy blood. Ever since the brown-haired one, things have changed for him. He's no longer satisfied with just blood. He wants to have the fairy at the same time. The first couple of times, he's fine. But the problem is he can't stop himself with just having them in the sexual sense. We've had some accidents, and to be perfectly honest, I can't chance losing my whole supply because he can't stop killing them. Thomas had started killing fairies? Was it recently? Why? My mind flashed to Patty. The puzzle pieces clicking into place were almost physically jarring. She'd been found about a month ago. She had brown hair. Jarek had said it started with the brown-haired one. He killed the brown-haired one and tossed her in the woods, didn't he? I had to ask, even though I knew the answer. When Jarek didn't answer right away, I pressed on. He ripped off her wings like some kind of sick trophy and left her for the animals. No trophies, no. He panicked and thought he could dispose of the body. He thought if he removed the wings, it would stay out of the hands of the saw. He clicked his tongue against the roof of his mouth. He should have come to me. I would have advised him on the correct method of disposal. Though I suppose I should thank him, since this is what resulted in you coming to us. He paused to turn his head and look me up and down. You, my dear, are a treasure trove. At my shocked look, he laughed and continued down the stairs. Don't tell me you didn't think we knew you'd been assigned to the case. Nothing happens in the city without my knowing. Those who harness an addiction harness the power. Don't you know? We'd reached the end of the stairs. The stairwell opened up into a large room. Tiny plastic pipes ran along the floor in an intersecting and perpendicular lines. that were grooved into the stone floor. The red lines all ran in the same direction to a mammoth glass vat in the center of the room. It must have stood 10 feet by 5 feet wide, and there was no mistaking the blood inside. It was thick and looked almost solid. At the base of the bin was a control panel whose LEDs blinked a slow blip. When Jarek saw my gaze transfixed on the oversized vat, his face lit up. Ah, yes, she's a beauty, isn't she? I had her custom made from the Czech Republic. You can't see it, but there are glass separators inside. The pipes go into floating chambers so the blood isn't mixing. Not unless that's what the customer wants anyway. All the blood in the outer rim is what we had to work with before we got my new baby here. Though I'm ashamed to say the digital control panel was what initially sold me. It pre-measures the amount it dispenses. It's perfect for our little parties or an unexpected drop-in. Understandably, my customers don't take kindly to having to wait. At that, he laughed, and we moved past the center room down a door-lined hall. Octagon windows sank into the doors like little portholes. He continued on, not that anyone would get too out of line, mind you. Since we are the only distributor of fairy blood, nobody would dare. They wouldn't want to be cut off. Fairy blood? How is he getting all of his blood? Where did all the blood come from? I couldn't help but ask. You will find out soon enough, he said as he came to the fourth door in the hall. Soon enough? That was the worst answer I'd ever heard. I didn't want to find out soon enough. I wanted him to tell me. Right after he let me go, that is. He punched some numbers into a keypad, and the door opened in front of us. A luxurious room was behind the door. A couch, television, and the fluffiest bed I'd ever seen beyond it. It was the most comfortable cell I'd ever seen. There was no way I was going in there. I wanted to punch him in his face. You can't just keep me here. He gave that sickeningly calm smile. Oh, I think I can. Then he slipped his foot under mine and lifted it. My knees buckled and he pushed me into the room as I lost my balance. I fell into a plush rug that tickled my hands as I reached down to catch myself. I'll be back later, and we can talk about these other fairies I've been hearing about. Maybe we can bargain for visits outside, or maybe visits from a certain nephew of mine, he said with another smile. I'll just need the location where the fairies are. Think on it. Disbelief left a gaping hole inside me. Sven was in on this? No way. He couldn't be. Jarek started to shut the door. That snapped me out of my trance. I lunged across the carpet, just missing the closure by inches. I slammed my fist against the thick metal. The sound absorbed into the plush room. His face peered in the window. At seeing me on the floor still, he nodded to himself once again and was gone. I hit the door again and again. You can't keep me in here, I screamed to the empty porthole that now only showed the cement wall of the foundation. Jarek didn't come back. I beat the door until my fists ached, and then I kicked it. I was not staying in here. I was not going to be like Patty. I wasn't. Tears threatened my vision. Sift fell to the floor, but I kept kicking. Someone had to come, and when they did, I was taking them out and getting the hell out of here. Eventually, I did stop, though, because I heard a voice. I thought I heard one anyway. Yeah, there it was again. It was such a small sound that hope sprang in my chest. Kitty? But when it came again, I realized the voice was male, and it was coming from the back of the room, by the bed. Feeling more than a little cautious, I put my feet underneath myself and rose without a sound. I tiptoed across the room, light as a feather, and stopped at the foot of the bed. There it was again. This time I could make out words, though. Girl, come here, girl, it said. Then after a moment's pause, it's okay. I won't hurt you. It took me a moment to find out where it was coming from, but after a second I realized the noise was coming from behind a painting right above the nightstand. I raised my fist and didn't make a sound as I lifted the picture off the wall. Behind the picture was a hole, and I was in the hole. Thankfully, or not thankfully, depending on your horror show mentality, it was attached to a face. It rotated up to me when the picture was removed from its path. Ah, there you are. And in one piece, no less. A fine thing that. Excuse me. I blinked a slow blink. It seemed so unreal. It just needed the Cheshire Cat smile and we'd be all set. I waited for that to appear. It seemed the most logical thing to happen right about now. It's been quite some time since they've brought a new fairy. Where did you come from? It asked. That's not important. What's going on in this freak show hotel? I asked this talking eyeball. in case I thought I was sane. I bored this through here when the last girl was here and I'd heard the screams. It allowed me to talk to her and give her a little bit of sanity after he visited. Thomas, I breathed. It must have been what Jarek had been talking about. The devil himself, the eye confirmed. I felt the color drain from my face. No, there was no way Thomas was Satan. Was he? It must have been obvious from my expression what I thought too, because he was quick to correct himself. Well, not the devil, but he might as well be. He's evil enough, he said. I breathed a sigh of relief. Dana's blessing. I couldn't handle hell being a part of the equation right now. There was enough to worry about. I dropped into the bed, the picture in my lap. The girl who was here before, was she a brown-haired fairy with brown eyes? I asked. That she was. Did you know her? He asked. I shook my head. Her life had been so unfair. No, I was brought in to investigate her murder. I laughed with a mirthless laugh. My lip quivered and I bit to keep the tears that threatened to fall at bay. When I could speak up again, I nodded and said, a fine job I did there. Then I moved up to be replaced by a set of lips. Hey, you're better than you think. You found out, didn't you? Fat load of good it does to be stuck in this place. I looked around the room. The thought of being stuck in this gilded cage made my skin crawl. It was just a matter of time before Thomas showed up, and I was not going out like Patty. I stood up. The metal from the collar brushed my collarbone. The touch startled me for a second before I remembered what it was. When my heartbeat slowed back down, I tapped it. The tinny sound was loud by my ear. It sounded almost like it was made out of aluminum. I'm sure that's what kept it so lightweight. So what's the story with the fancy dog collars? I asked the eye that had reappeared in the hole. Those things are the gatekeeper for everything around here. They monitor your blood, so the vamps know when they can take more. They monitor your health, so they can keep you healthy and produce quality blood. The collar will even beep when you have to donate blood, as I like to call it. I thought of my blood being pumped into that vat outside, and my stomach turned. How could someone think they could do this to another living being? Then again, to Jarek, we were probably little no better than cows. There's no way in hell I'm doing it, I said, fury coursing through my body. From the way that I went side to side, I could tell he was shaking his head. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. They will come in and sedate you to take it. On top of it, there will be punishments. Punishments are at the discretion of Thomas. He's in charge of the comings and goings here. Take it from me when I say the less Thomases around, the better. Especially for you. I heard he's already smitten with you. My jaw dropped. I'd just gotten here. How had he heard that already? Agitated, I paced the small bedroom area, my bare feet swishing through the carpet. How did you hear that? One of the workers mentioned it when they brought in their second meal the other day. Said Thomas sent him to get you, that you'd gotten wings and were fair game now as far as Jarek was concerned. I didn't know what he meant by that, but he did say Thomas was head over heels for you, just like the others before he... That made me stop. All the facts were there. I couldn't ignore it. He was going to kill me, isn't he? The way he stilled confirmed the fears rioting around inside me. Fear ran through my inside, leaving knots in its wake. So this was it. This was how it ended. No, forget that. I wasn't giving up that easy. That's just not going to happen, I said, stalking back to the studio apartment type room. How can you stop it? He's a vampire. Vampires are even stronger than vampires. So you don't have a chance. Unless you could use your abilities, I suppose. But these collars shock you if you even try to use them. Yeah, I figured that out already, I said under my breath as I went back to the bank of drawers in the corner. I rifled through them. They were bare except clothes. I dumped all the clothes on the floor looking for anything sharp. Nothing. I turned back to the room, my heart beating faster. There had to be something. Then my eyes fell on the TV. Bingo. I went over to it and flipped it around. There wasn't really anything poking out the back that I could use as a weapon, but there was bound to be something inside. Picking up the TV, I smashed it down on the gleaming black corner of the TV stand. I smashed it down over and over again, careful not to damage the front of the unit. Pieces splintered off the back. I spent the next 30 minutes fishing pieces out so I could use them as a weapon and hiding them around the room. After I finished taking a large plastic piece under my pillow and turning the TV back around, I was as secure as I was going to feel. Now, we just had to wait. Chapter 48. A dark head appeared in the porthole. Even though the head was tipped down from the side of the head, I could tell it was a guy. I looked closer as the hair moved as he fumbled with the door handle. My heart climbed to my throat as the hand jiggled. Who now? It was hard to see from the distance through the thick glass of the porthole. Was it Thomas? I prayed the gods it wasn't. I couldn't handle that already. I braced myself. Whoever it was, they were going down. This was my chance. Then the fairy, who had come to find out was named Orin, spoke up. Cy, the picture! My eyes fell on the picture still in the bed. Crap. I'd been so caught up in who was at the door that I almost entirely forgotten the hole that was still exposed. I threw myself across the bed and quickly hung the picture back over the new friend in the other room. I just turned to put my head on the pillow as the door to the room swung open. There was a pause, no doubt while he was looking at me, and then the door closed. With the smallest of movements, I reached my hand under the pillow and gripped the shard from the broken piece of TV. The edges bit into my palm as I listened to the footsteps get closer. I tried to look like I was sleeping, but that wasn't an easy feat with my heart doing an impression of a horse race. It must have been convincing enough, though, because the footsteps came to me slowly. 3 more seconds. 3. He stepped to the edge of the bed. 2. I felt him over me. Go time. I sprang up with one motion. I grabbed his bicep and smashed my forearm against his neck. Keeping the momentum, I rolled him onto the bed and pressed the shard against his neck. That's when I stopped to look at his face. Sven! Shock rocked me back. Hope soared in my chest, but I killed it. How could you be involved in something like this? I turned my head to spit on the bed to let him see my disgust. He brought his hands up to show me he meant no harm. Look, I didn't even know this existed until 5 minutes ago. That pesky Hope wanted to trickle back in, but I wasn't having it. Oh yeah? Then how in the hell did you know where to find me? I pressed the piece of plastic harder against his throat. It was either that or let him go, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't, I reminded myself. At least not until I knew for sure he wasn't lying. He swallowed around the pressure against his throat. Kitty told me he took you. I didn't take that rocket scientist it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out where to go. Kitty told him? Hope swelled in my chest. That little pixie might not be so bad after all. Sven took my silence as accepting his innocence and rolled us. I looked for her, but didn't see her anywhere. Where is she? I asked. He stretched my arms above me. She took off, said something about getting reinforcements. Frankly, I don't know who. She can't exactly bring fairies in here. They'll all get slaughtered. The image of fairy corpses heaped on each other around that awful vat out there made me shudder. Then another thought occurred to me. Does your uncle know you're here? I asked. No, in fact, I'd never even heard of this before. Well, scratch that. Now that I think about it, the concept came up as a joke years ago when I asked him before where he'd been getting the fairy blood from after all these years. Apparently, my reaction to the idea made him think better of sharing this with me. He knows me too well. I wouldn't have stood for this. So how did you get down here then? I asked, starting to get very distracted by his body pressing against mine. He tried and failed not to look too smug as he said, I did some motivational speaking with the guard. My fists did most of the talking. Tell me you killed him. I willed it to be true as I put down the shard I'd been clasping tight. No, but he won't be bothering us for any time in the near future. I frowned at his delicious lips. I'd rather he be dead. Since when did you become so bloodthirsty? He asked, lowering his mouth to where his lips almost touched mine. His lips being so close to mine made the thoughts in my head go fuzzy. Some time between being kidnapped by my own kind and threatened with a face worse than death by yours. Remind me not to cross you, he said as his tongue snuck out to caress my lips. You got it, I whispered, not daring to move my lips lest it stop the delicious sensations coursing through me. Then his lips caught mine in a kiss that tilted the world on its axis. Everything narrowed to the press of his body against mine, the rush of his lips on me. Until he broke the kiss, that is. I blinked a slow blink. Without him to anchor me, I felt like I'd lost my center and was adrift. From the look on his face, it was clear he felt the same way. We can't do that now. We need to get you out of here, he said, standing up and pulling me up with him. When we were on my feet, the world was cleared a little. Right, now you're talking. He laced his fingers in mine when we were off. We can go out the way I came in, the back entrance. Just stay behind me. I'm big enough to where I can block anyone from seeing you until I've had a chance to take them out, he said as we headed to the door. I stopped in my tracks, our linked hands making him stop too. I can't leave Orin, I said. Then thinking better of it, I shook my head. No, screw that. I can't leave any of them. Who? Sven asked, confused and blinking across his face. The look I gave him said he'd better be kidding. His eyes fell on my wing, and I could see the pieces click into place. No, there's no way we can sneak all those damn fairies out, too. There isn't a chance in hell. I widened my stance to show it wasn't open for negotiation. Cy, it's suicide. His hands went wide as he spoke. He was nervous. People often talked with their hands when they're nervous. I dropped my hand from his. I'd rather die than know I let who knows how many fairies rot in this glorified milk factory. His face clearly said he was not happy as he picked my hand up none too gently. You just might get your wish, he said as he grabbed my hand and we ran to the door together. Chapter 49. My teeth were on edge as we stepped into the hall. I didn't know if the cold that soaked into my bones from some poorly insulated fountain. Let me try that one again. Chapter 49. My teeth were set on edge as we stepped into the hall. I didn't know if the cold that soaked into my bones was from the poorly insulated foundation wall or from the fact that I was scared out of my wits. Probably the latter, because there was no way we were getting out of here alive. Sven went to turn to the right, but I stopped him with a hand on his arm. I pointed to Oren's door. I wanted to make sure we grabbed him first. With a shrug that said one was just as good as another, he went to Oren's door. He stuck two hairpins in the lock and started jiggling the handle. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, I shouted to him. A lock of hair fell over his face as he worked the pins. I got you out, didn't I? I raised an eyebrow at him. I adored him, but there was no way this was going to get us all out in time. Someone was bound to notice one of us was missing before the end of time. A moment later, the door clicked open. He gave me a smug smile. I pushed past him and pressed a finger against his chest. Yeah. He nipped the air with a click of his teeth as I passed. I shot a look at him. I meant to frown, but I couldn't keep the smile that tickled my lips off my face. How is it that he could make me feel like playing when we were in the life or death situation? I stepped into the room. It was identical to the one I'd been in. I shouldn't have been surprised. They were little more than cells. When I stepped into the room, I searched for Oren. He was still by the bed where I'd left him. He was a slip of a black man with a shock of steel-colored hair. He'd stood up when we entered. Even across the room, I could clearly see he was a head shorter than I was. Considering how short I was, that said a lot. I closed the space to his side. Girl, you'd had me scared to death, he said as he pulled me into a hug like we'd known each other for years rather than the short time we really had. At first I held stiff, but then I buckled and returned his embrace. I was just grateful we were still alive. After a second, I pulled out of his arms. We're getting out of here, Oren, I said, ushering forward. He blinked at me in confusion. What? Hope and denial wore on his face. We can't leave. Oh, yes, we can. Come on. I grabbed his arm and this time and pulled him with me. We'd gotten 2 steps when he pulled out of my grasp. No, we can't leave. He shook his head and pointed to the collar on his neck. These track your locations so you can't escape. As if to prove his point, little lights flashed on the collar. Anger curled inside me. I ground my teeth together. I wanted to scream. What's next? My hands knotted into fists, my nails biting into my palm. This was total bullshit. What were we supposed to do now? I growled low in my throat. Short of killing everyone in the place, there wasn't anything we could do. Heat burned inside me. I kicked the couch. I winced as dull pain blossomed on my big toe. Just great. Why don't you let me have a look at it, Sven said, coming forward. Upon seeing Sven was a vampire, Oren backed up, hesitation clear on his face. I grabbed his arm and gave it a little quick pat for reassurance. It's okay. He's a good one. From the look Oren gave me, I might as well have said there were good demons, too. To prove my point, I offered my collared neck to Sven. He brought his hands down to it. He felt around the collar and pressed random spots. You know, I think I could just rip this off. Oren tripped over himself as he rushed forward. No, don't. There's a needle in there. It's used to hook up when we donate blood. You'll rip her neck open. My whole body stilled. I focused on breathing in and out as I tried not to panic. Well, isn't that a fun fact? I quipped. Sven was silent and continued to stare at it. Then he slipped his fingers in between the collar and my neck. He felt around until he came against resistance. I felt something tug and a little prick of pain. The needle. It was in my jugular. Finally, he said, No, I don't think it'll rip you open. I think I can do it without hurting you. If I break it from the back where the clasp is, it should pull clean out. You think? Oren asked. He folded his arms across his chest, he clearly was not in favor of the idea. I bit my lip to think. I agreed with him that I didn't like the think there. Just exactly what would happen if Sven ripped my neck open. Would they be able to stop me from bleeding? Would I die? Fear hardened in my gut. What choice did we have, though? Rot in here for the rest of our very long lives? No way. I let my lip go and squared my shoulders. Holding my head high, I said, "Do it." Sven let go of the collar and looked into my eyes. He threaded his fingers into my hair as he stared deep into my eyes. Love shone bright in his. When he lowered his lips to mine, my heart thudded against my ribcage as I leaned in to kiss him deeper. His tongue swept into my mouth just enough to leave me dizzy with desire before he broke the kiss. His eyes searched mine, questioning. It strengthened the resolve in me. I nodded. He let me go. I immediately felt his absence. He went to the back of the collar. His fingers grazed my neck as he moved my hair to the side. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I couldn't tell if it was from nerves or his nearness. He gripped the collar. "Ready?" he asked. "For what, Christmas? At this rate, we'll get there," I said. "Smart ass," he said with a laugh, and then he ripped. Metal crunched in my ear. At the same time as the metal pulled apart, he pulled the pieces forward. I gasped as a tiny needle left my flesh. Immediately, my hand went to my throat. My fingers came away with blood. It wasn't enough to where I was going to die, though. See? I was fine. Nonetheless, my hand shook a little as I brought it back down. Sven turned me around, concern knitting his brow. "Am I bleeding bad?" I asked, trying not to act like visions of my dead body on the floor were already swimming in my head. He leaned forward and looked at it and said, "No, not bad. It should stop in a second." I let out the breath I didn't know I was holding. Leaning closer, his tongue flicked out. It trailed up my neck. My toes curled at the heat that built in my stomach from the simple act. I pushed at his chest, though. A part of me couldn't get with the idea that he was licking my blood. He backed off. I could tell he didn't want to, though. A flicker of lightning flashed over his face and then was gone. He licked his lips. I gave him a droll look. Fairy blood might be addicting, but I'd be damned if I was going to be a sample platter. He winked and dropped the crushed collar to the couch. "What can I say? You're electric." "Oh, brother." I tried not to laugh and encourage him. Then I turned to Oren. "What do you think? Do you want to get out of here?" With a measured look at Sven, he stepped up to him. "If it's either die at your hands or stay here another 200 years, I'd rather die right now." The removal of his collar wasn't quite that dramatic. A pop later and his collar joined mine on the couch. "Now let's get the rest of the fairies and get the hell out of here," I said. I headed to the door. Their feet made no sound on the floor, but I knew they were behind me. I let out a slow breath, and we nodded. We just might pull this off. Chapter 50. The door handle glowed red until it started to drip. Then the whole thing turned to liquid and fell to the floor with a hiss. Oren stepped away. He didn't even crack a smile at the ingenious use of his impressive ability. I could understand that. He wasn't celebrating yet, even if we were at the last fairy on the list. The rest of the fairies huddled behind Sven in varied states of shock and disbelief. I tried not to let it show on my face how bad I felt that they'd been here so long as I looked up in the hall. I'm sure the concept of leaving after all this time seemed unreal to them. After checking down the hall the other way, I could safely confirm we were still vampless. Swell. Sven grabbed my hand and dropped the hairpins from earlier in there. "Next time we need a beauty consultant, I'll call you," I whispered to Sven as I shoved them in my pocket. I whispered loud enough that the waiting fairies could hear. A little joking would help lighten their mood. "Hey, you're going to need those bobby pins someday, and who's going to be laughing then?" he whispered back in mock seriousness. I dropped a kiss onto his lips and stepped forward to open the door. I appreciated him playing with me. Inside, a tall fairy with pale blue hair that hung down her back stood strong. Despite her stance, her eyes were wide in her pale face. Then she saw me and took a few steps forward in relief. When Sven pushed past me, she recoiled again. After almost a dozen fairies, their reactions had stopped being a surprise. "It's okay. I'm Cy, and this is Sven. We're here to help," I assured her as Sven went to her. "Just stay still while he takes the collar off you. It might hurt a tad, but it won't be bad." Even though she looked like a doe ready to run, she did as she was told. I stayed in the doorway to keep an eye out for any vampires. Seconds later, Sven had the collar off. He dropped it onto the floor with an encouraging smile to the lithe fairy. She rubbed her neck like she couldn't believe the sensation. She blinked and blinked again as her lips thinned. White flared against the pink of her lips as she bit the top one. I wasn't surprised when the tears started to flow down her cheeks. Then she threw herself into Sven's arms. He rocked back with a sudden weight. "Thank you, sweet Danu, thank you," she sobbed into his chest. An expression between a grimace and pity sat on his face as he brought his hands up to awkwardly hug her. We didn't have time for this. I walked over and pulled her away with gentle hands. "Well, we have to get out of here, or there won't be much to thank us for." She nodded repeatedly as I walked her to the door. "What's your name, sweetie?" I asked. "Wendy," she said offhandedly, only half listening as she took in the fairies huddled in the hall. "Okay, Wendy, we need you to keep your wits about you. If you see a vampire, scream, got it?" I said as I ushered into the group. She nodded as one of the girls put a hand on her shoulder and smiled up at her. When she returned the smile, I could see some of the shock was starting to melt from her posture. Good. We needed the able-bodied fairies right now, not easy targets. A scared body was a dead body, and I'd had enough of death. Sven followed us, keeping his sights out for any enemies. He took point in front. The set of his shoulders said he was ready to do this. For the 100th time, I was grateful that he was here, and I didn't have to attempt to do this alone. "Listen up," I said in a loud whisper. "We're going to go over the signals one more time, okay?" Everyone nodded. Some of them nodded a little too fast, but I ignored it and pretended no one was in freak-out mode. "This means stop." I held my hand up to make a stop sign. "This means go." I closed my fist. "When we go straight, we'll go straight, but if we have to change directions, I'll point the way we're going. Sven will give the go-ahead. 2-foot taps means stay. 3-foot taps means go." I looked at all the wide eyes in front of me and wished that this could be different. At least we could give them a chance, even if it was a small one. "This is go time, people. No more stops for this train. Just an express ride to freedom if we play our cards right. So pay attention and keep your eyes open." Then a thought hit me. It had worked for me. Maybe it could work for them. My voice became stronger as I said, "And just remember, you aren't defenseless. You have your ability. Use it as a weapon if you need to. You hear me?" Some mouth drops opened at that, but they nodded slowly. I was glad to see their acceptance. We weren't brought up to use our weapons as abilities, so it was an odd concept to say the least. I started playing with mine as weapons after I left Knocknane to pass the time when I was alone in my apartment. I'd even used it in a few real-life instances and had been shockingly effective. Sure, it had taken me a long time to learn how. The chances of them getting it down now were slim, but we were desperate. We needed every tool at our disposal. I turned to Sven and nodded. He reached a hand back. I took it. It felt good in mine, reassuring. He squeezed it and whispered, "Shall we?" After a squeeze back, I dropped his hand. Bringing my hand up, I arced it and gathered a little bit of energy into it. Lightning licked around my wrist. It wasn't enough to do any real damage, but it would stun anyone enough to give us a fighting chance. Satisfied, I nodded at Sven. We were as ready as we were ever going to be. With a nod back, he turned and headed down the hall. I followed him, my insides rioting at the quiet. It seemed like something as monumental as this would be surrounded by screams and war cries, but not the barest swish of feet whispering against the cold tiled floor. Here we were, soundless in our quest for freedom. Sven had already done some scouting ahead. The best way out was a stairwell around the back. It was used for deliveries. And bonus, there was no one there right now. The front stairwell I'd been drugged down was closer, but that wasn't a good idea. It flowed right into the living room. I'd learned from last time that was not the place to make an escape. When I came back to the first stairwell, Sven held his hand up in the stop sign signal we'd gone over. I grimaced as dozens of fairy feet clomped over each other at the unexpected stop. We weren't Navy SEALs, that was for sure. Sven came out of the military-style crouch we'd been stalking forward in and sauntered up to the open space. He tried to make the walk look natural, but I certainly wouldn't have hired him for any acting gigs based on it. With slow movements that were painful to watch, he glanced to the stairs. Then he stopped to stretch and look the other way. After the barest pause, he dropped his hands and walked through the other side. When he walked through the next hall, we couldn't see him. The thought of all the fairies being the only ones here with me made me more than a little nervous. I willed him to hurry and leaned forward to hear the foot taps. Nothing. Sweat wet my palms. I dropped the energy I'd been holding and wiped them on my jeans. It was okay. Everything was fine. I lied to myself as we waited. I didn't know if the fairies behind me could hear my stomach churning, but it seemed loud enough that the vampires should be able to hear it. Then the noise we'd been waiting for came. Tap, tap, tap. Dana's blessing. Acting like I had all the calm of a Tibetan monk, I raised my hand in the air as I closed a fist. I took 2 steps into the room. I fully expected a vampire to jump out of the shadows at me. When none came, I breathed an inward sigh of relief and pointed forward to push the fairies through. Orin was the first one behind me. I gave him a meaningful look and then a glance forward, saying he had to take the lead. He nodded, a grave nod, and marched forward. This was the only intersection, so now I could go to the rear to close the loop of protection. One by one, the fairies passed. Their looks of adoration made me uncomfortable, but I didn't react with the denial that was shaking its head inside me. I figured they could use a little hope in their lives, and if that had to be me, then so be it. When the last of them were past, I jumped back in line. The face of the girl I followed was frozen in fear as her little feet marched forward. It was louder than I would have liked, but I gave her a little pat in the back for encouragement. I was rewarded when her frame straightened a little more and the step of her feet lightened. That's a good girl, I thought. We just might make it out here after all. Then a hand clamped over my mouth. Chapter 51. Leaving so soon, little fairy of mine? Whispered a familiar voice in my ear. That won't do. You're mine now. My stomach dropped into the black hole of fear. Sift dropped to the ground underneath me. Thomas. I gathered energy into my hands and threw them back. Thomas jumped back. He never let go of my head, though, so my head snapped with a sudden movement. My body fell backwards. I beat my wings in an attempt to right myself. He caught me with his free arm and pulled me back my back flush against his. My wings folded between us. There should have been pain. I knew there should have been, but before my brain could process it, his teeth were on me. With a mouthful of my neck, he said, "Pull it again, and I will drain you faster than you can call your precious Sven's name, you understand?" His teeth pricked my skin as he spoke around my flesh. Droplets of blood slid warm down my neck. I hated that my lips trembled underneath his palm. I couldn't help it, though. All of this was for nothing. And then on the edges of my consciousness, the shuffle of feet hit me. They were getting quieter and quieter as they left me behind. If I could keep Thomas away from them, at least they could get out. At least it wouldn't be for nothing. Because if a fight started, it would be sure to bring the others, and there was no way a dozen fairies could win against all of these vampires. "Get it?" he prodded, squeezing my bicep in his hand. I could feel bruises forming under his grip. Panic ran around inside me, ringing all kinds of warning bells. I didn't want this. Nothing good could come of it. How could I say no, though? I couldn't see all those fairies die. So I nodded that I understood. With a hand over my mouth, presumably in case I changed my mind, he dragged me back to the main corridor. Only when we were in the corridor and concealed by the huge vat did he remove his hand from my mouth. And I found out that it was only to push me up against the vat. The coolness of it sent chills down my spine. My wings weren't much of a barrier against the chill. Well, the chill was either from that, or him pressing close to me. "You think you're so clever, using your charms to convince that weak Sven to help you set your friends free, don't you?" He gripped my jaw in his strong hands and pulled my head to the side. "Do you think I really care about that?" "Not even in the slightest. Since you and your friends were kind enough to show yourselves to me, I know there are more fairies." Who was he anyway? Your lover?" He was talking about Anthony. Pressure built inside my head. My face reddened with suppressed fury. When it became clear I wasn't going to answer him, he let go of my jaw and patted my cheek. "Well, that doesn't matter much now, does it? I'm going to have my way with you over and over again, in fact, and when I'm done, you're going to take us to that rock you have been hiding under." "In your dreams," I spat and hit him in the face. His eyes screamed fury as he grabbed a hold of my wrists and pinned them above my head. I whimpered as he gripped them tight. "You're damn right in my dreams, and it will be in your nightmares, pretty. You can be sure of that," he said, and his eyes narrowed on my lips. With rough hands, he pulled me toward him. Even if I didn't want to put the other fairies at risk, I'd be damned if I sat here and let him take me. So I did the only thing I could. I kicked at him. He laughed, so I tried to bite him. While I was in the middle of snapping at him, a voice came from the other side of the vat. "You'll touch her over my dead body," he said. My head whipped to the side so fast I was surprised I didn't knock myself out in the thick glass wall. Hope flared in my chest as Sven came into view. Thomas went to pull me behind him. "Stay out of this, half-breed." Sven caught my arm before Thomas had gotten me behind him and shook his head. Don't let Jarek hear you say that. He'll break you. No amount of being his favorite will save you then. Then it hit me. Sven was a vampire and Thomas was a vampire. Did that mean Thomas was stronger than Sven? I hadn't ever wanted to play the role of damsel in distress, but if I had to be one, the last I wanted to hear was that my knight in shining armor wasn't a match for the dragon. Does that mean you aren't as strong as him? I whispered to Sven. There wasn't a good way to ask, but I had to know. A satisfied smile spread over Thomas's face. I wanted to put charge in his ass, but I didn't want to hurt Sven. You don't have a claim to her. She's mine now, Thomas said as he pulled me to him. Sven sucked in a sharp intake of breath. His eyes went immediately to my neck. I could feel it zero in on the few drops of blood I knew were drying there. Did he mark you? He asked, directing his question to me. My expression deadpanned on him. Mark me? How in the hell am I supposed to know? I all but blabbered. If you mean did he bite me, then, well, his teeth went a little bit, but I don't think he took any blood. And frankly, this is the worst time in the world to have the just the tip conversation. Sven visibly relaxed. I wish I'd have free hand to hit him rather than have my hands stretched between a vampire and a vampire. Then he would come back to the land of logical. It doesn't matter, said Thomas, pulling me to him again. When this is all over, I will mark her. She is mine. Not if I mark her first, Sven said and pulled me back to him. This was getting out of hand. Maybe I should just shock both of them. Hey, I'm right here, I said. When she's a real vampire, she's not going to want some weakling like you, Thomas said, pulling me back to him. Fury boiled inside of me. I'd had enough. I'm not a yo-yo, I screamed to the dark raptors above. My wings beat with anger. Before I knew what was happening, my feet were inches off the floor. Crap. Sift rained under the tile. I could barely hear it above the feet that trampled into the room, though. Oh, no. That brought my head up. The guys had pulled me more into the center of the room, so I saw them coming this time. All the fairies we just so valiantly rescued poured into the room, a wave of colorful wings and angry faces. Orin left the ragamuffin pack. Get your hands off her, Orin said as they plowed towards us. Teal glitter flew up around Wendy as she ran. She curved her delicate hands into a circle and then made crisscrosses. Then with a jerky twist, she put her palm over the top of her hand. Her robes billowed out as she pushed them towards Thomas. The movement was unsure, but a shot of wind came out nonetheless. I wanted to shout for joy. She'd done it. My feet had just touched back down to the cold tile when the wind hit him. His eyes flew wide open as a gust of wind blew him back. He hit the wall with a crack. When he fell, pieces of tile from the wall fell too. Then Sven dropped my hand and was on him. Too bad it wasn't quick enough. Thomas just got one knee up as Sven crashed a fist down. He blocked the blow with a brace of his forearms. Bless those beautiful fairies, though, because even though they were going to be battling a vampire, they didn't stop. As they reached the vampire and vampire trading blows, the door to the cellar burst open. The noise must have alerted the vampires upstairs. A tall, thin one ran a couple feet down the steps. As seeing all the fairies, he called up the stairs. My eyes were glued to the steps when the last of the dozen vampires appeared. Sven? Little busy here. His words were punctuated with thuds. Yeah, but we need to get out of here. The vampires descended the stairs in a wave of black. Like now? Everyone else seemed to hear the commotion then. All the fairies turned to see what was happening. One by one, the hiss of Sift could be heard as their worst nightmares rushed at them. Just seeing it alone made them step back in fear, leaving piles of glitter on the floor like a melting rainbow. I stepped back behind the vat. Maybe the vampires wouldn't see me right away and I could jump on them. I coiled energy into myself and held my hands into the shape of a ball. I felt lightning tickle and jump between the slick palms. I wanted to wipe the sweat from them, but I didn't dare. I would only have a split second to make my move, and I wanted to be ready. Then seconds later, it happened. The vampires poured into view. They were in a line like a bad game of Red Rover. How was I going to get all of them at once? The problem solved itself when the most blessed thing happened. They stepped in the river of glitter and slipped. It was almost comical the way they went down, with their jackknifed legs and heads knocking against each other. Others went straight back like reverse zombies. It was beautifully hysterical. And then it hit me. We were wasting a perfect opportunity. Attack! I yelled as I shot my prep to lightning at the nearest vampire. His body flailed and seized. The other fairies looked at me like I was insane before they saw what I was doing. When they realized what I wanted them to do, they went right to it, moving together in a symphony of hand gestures. Then every manifestation imaginable shot into and around the pool of vampires. Wind, water, boulders, fires, you name it. It was a disaster, too. It was like the equivalent of a kid fight but with abilities. Water hit the ceiling to rain down on everyone. A boulder flew at me. I ducked and it smashed into the vat. I was still in the middle of congratulating myself on my moves when I heard the cracked splinter behind me. You have got to be kidding me. I turned around just in time to see the vat open up. Blood broke through the crack in a tidal wave. I barely had time to shout, "Everybody out!" before the wave buckled my knees. Everything was a wash of red before I closed my eyes. The thick shock of ice-cold blood coated me as the force of the expulsion carried me away. The screams of the others were muted as blood filled my ears. I reached out to grab onto something to stop me, but there was nothing to grab onto. My slick grip latched onto a leg, but I couldn't hold on. The leg kicked at me, so it couldn't have been friendly. I belatedly punched at it. My hand hit nothing but air. I finally stopped when I hit the wall. Thankfully, the blood had thinned out enough to where I hit with more of a thump than a smash. I was heavy with blood. My clothes had absorbed most of it. So much of it, in fact, that when I stood up, Sven's pants, which were loose to begin with, fell to my feet. Looks like I wouldn't be using those after all. I kicked them away. I surveyed the damage and tried not to think about my butt being exposed. Hospital fashion. You gotta love it. My butt was all but forgotten as I saw what was in front of me. Almost every vampire in the room was on the floor, pushing blood into their mouths, squeezing it off the tile with desperate fingers, squeezing out the excess blood into their mouths from their clothes. Everyone but Thomas and Sven, that is. But it was clear from the set of their bodies that they were having a hard time fighting the urge to resist. The fairies stood in shock, watching the vampires twitch and then bliss roll over their faces as their bodies started to spasm. Frost, heat, and water were just a few of the powers flashing across their skins, so fast it made my brain doubt what my eyes were seeing. Wendy dropped to her knees and started sobbing. I'm sure after 150 years of captivity, of seeing the cheapness of why you'd been held your whole life must have been heartbreaking. The senselessness of it. We could mourn another time for their loss. Now was not the time. "Everyone get out!" I shouted. That broke the spell that had shocked everyone into stillness. Fairies made a break for it, but the blood slowed down their descent, causing their feet to slip over the wet stone. A larger male fairy went down, but he started crawling across the floor. Blood seeped into and crept up his pant legs and shirt sleeves. Thomas's fevered command ran through the basement. "Get Cy! Don't let her get away! Jarek will have your heads!" That seemed enough to spur the vampires into action. They were slowed down by the fey blood clouding their minds, but it was enough to get the fight back into full-fledged swing. My gut turned into a ball of lead. That had been our chance. I cursed that I hadn't been closest to the vat. The blood had carried me the farthest. I'd ended up clear against the stairwell. Abilities and manifestations were being thrown around again, as well as some resourceful fairies had picked up pieces of glass and were slashing at the vampires. The vampires bared their fangs. The blood soaked everything, no doubt adding to their zeal. The fairies stood strong, though. They got points for effort, that was for sure. Too bad points didn't keep you alive. I needed to get over there. I stepped out onto the floor and went down quicker than a drunken jackrabbit. Just great. How was I supposed to get over there when the floor was so slippery? Maybe I could try my wings. I focused on moving them like I had when I was at Knocknane. It took one flutter for pain to shoot up my wing. Pain bowed my back. Ouch! Apparently I damaged my wing when taking out Pugface. Maybe I could just help from here. Gathering energy, I arced lightning over. It all but fizzled by the time it reached the fight. The vampires were stunned for barely a second before they went right back to fighting. I concentrated again and gathered more energy. When I shouted over this time, one of them actually fell. Score. That would work. I went to gather energy again, but exhaustion pulled at me. Okay, so it was effective, but not sustainable. I ground my teeth. There had to be another way. I studied the fight. It didn't take me long to notice most of the manifestations hit the vampires and just shut them down for a second. There was one thing that seemed to be doing some damage, though. It was a fire from a wiry male. I think he knew it, too, because even though sweat matted his fluorescent orange hair, he kept going hard. When he hit one vampire in the chest and she turned to actual ash, I knew what we had to do. I pointed to the fairy across the room and shouted, "Everyone protect him! You shoot at their hearts!" At my direction, everyone crowded around him. He shot between the bodies. It took a couple tries, but another went down. Miracle of miracles, it actually seemed to be working. My eyes went to Sven and Thomas. It was anyone's guess as to who was winning there. No, to Sven's credit, they both seemed pretty beaten up. When I looked back to the fairies, though, I saw a new problem. Fire was shooting everywhere. Either the fairy couldn't see through the fence of bodies, or he was used to directing his power, or he wasn't used to directing his power like a weapon. It took all of 5 seconds to look around and realize the place was going to catch fire. I opened my mouth to tell the fairy with the water to keep an eye on the fire streams that were going astray, but I stopped. I couldn't remember his name. John? Jerry? Joseph? Before I could, though, a hand clamped over my mouth. Fear dropped the bottom out of me. What is this? You have caused quite a mess here, haven't you? Said a voice. I recognized the voice in my ear before Jarek's face came into my peripheral. His normally calm demeanor was spread thin over a frame of rage that ran underneath. He didn't look at me. He just studied the unlikely battlefield. My gaze followed his. My stomach pitted as I realized the vampires had started to form their own counterattacks. Some of the fairies already lay dead on the beige and red tile, including the one who had the water ability. It was too late to stop the insanity, though. Fire crawled up the rafters and spread down the walls. The whole place was going to come down in a matter of minutes. We had to get out of here. The psychotic vampire whose grip I was right now in, though, didn't seem fazed by the inferno that was blazing in front of us. As much as I like you, Miss Vanguard, you've put my first in command against my nephew. Likely you've turned him against me as well. I just can't have that. He let out a breath of disgust as another fairy dropped to the floor dead. And it looks like I'm going to have to find even more fairies. This is not good. Not good at all. His face was steady as he surveyed the chaos. I really wanted to keep you around. I had all these plans for you that went far above what Thomas wanted. But I'm afraid I'll have to kill those plans now. I can't have you causing all this trouble, no matter the new delicious possibilities you could bring to vampire kind. I'm afraid you're going to have to die. Fear rose like acid in my throat. No, I couldn't die. I willed Sven to turn to me, to see me. He ducked a punch from Thomas and whirled to crack an elbow against his chest. Thomas grabbed his arm even as it crushed his chest and pulled him down with him. Pulled Sven down with him. Keeping you alive isn't worth it, Jarek explained. You'll cause even more destruction. We can find the other fairies on our own. Thomas told me where the redhead picked you up. The others have to be in the same area. Fear drilled through the panic as I thought of the Fae living peacefully in Knockname. They didn't deserve to die because of me. Then a dead calm followed the thought. He wasn't going to find them if I had anything to do with it. I curled my hands and slipped a charge into them. I reached back and connected them to his thighs. With a thought, I let the charge flow. I didn't stop it. I just let it flow into him. His body spasmed. That's it, I thought as I felt his body jump. Die. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. His feet. He kicked my feet out from underneath me. I fell hard to the tile. Pain shot through my shoulder. With movements of the speed of a freight train, he followed me. He jerked my hands up. I screamed as pain exploded in my shoulder. It was dislocated. I could feel the pain radiating from it. He dropped his knees onto my bicep, pinning both my arms underneath him. Then he grabbed my hair and yanked my head up in one fluid motion. Without a word, he jammed his teeth into my neck. The pain was excruciating as he sucked my blood out. I didn't know what had made it so magical when Sven bit me, but it was nothing like this. Pain pulsed at the center of it like a time bomb. I jerked around my lower half in vain as I attempted to dislodge him. He was like a rock statue as he sucked the life from my body. I couldn't do this on my own. My eyes immediately found Sven. Flames licked down the walls behind them. Sven did the most unexpected thing then. He grabbed Thomas by the shirt front. Even as Thomas continued to pummel him, Sven pushed him into the wall. Flames engulfed Thomas as Sven held him there. Thomas shrieked as his limbs flailed in the fire. Sven's hands just started to catch fire when he pulled them out. He swatted out the flames on his jeans. I could see his burns from here, but thankfully he was still okay. I gathered all my strength I could and shouted, "Sven!" His eyes immediately found mine. When he saw his uncle bent over me, fury exploded over his face. He started to run to us, his arms pumping. He'd never make it over the floor. It turns out he was quicker thinking than my panicked brain, though. When he reached the blood-covered floor, he shot his legs forward. The momentum pushed him across the floor to us like a bullet. Before I had time to process it, he had grabbed Jarek by the hair and uppercut him. My sluggish mind appreciated that Sven did that rather than pull Jarek off. My throat would have likely been ripped out. The two had launched into a battle of epic proportions while I found the energy to raise my hand to my neck. I was weaker than I had been a minute ago, if that was even possible. The slickness of the blood on my neck made it hard to keep steady pressure on it. Was I still bleeding? Did I have to stop the blood flow for me to stop? Did he have to stop the blood flow for my bleeding to stop? I wish I knew more about vampires. I was going to have to ask Sven all about this, if we made it out of here alive, which at this moment was starting to look highly debatable. This wasn't working. I gathered the edge of my hospital gown and pulled it up to my neck. Seconds after I put it there, it was soaked. I kept it pressed tight against my neck, though, and prayed it would stop the blood flow. I directed my attention back to the fight. Even though my eyes had never left them, I couldn't seem to concentrate on more than one thing at a time. The edge of my vision seemed to fuzz around them as I followed their movements. Kick, punch, push, jab. Their movements were faster than normal. Watching them go back and forth was starting to make me nauseous, but I couldn't find the energy to take my eyes off them. I knew the fairies and vampires were still fighting. I wanted to look up to see their progress. There was less and less scuffling. I hoped that meant good things. It took me a second, but I slowly realized it was starting to become hard to breathe. My chest pressed in on itself. Breathing seemed important, so I focused on that. To be honest, it seemed less and less important as the second passed, though. Mostly, I just wanted to close my eyes and sleep. Then Sven's body fell in front of me. My eyes drank in his beautiful face. I wanted to fall asleep in his arms. His eyes met mine. I went to touch his face. I wanted to touch him more than anything. I wanted to tell him how much I cherished him, but I couldn't reach more than a couple inches before I had to drop my hand again. It was too much work. Instead, I decided just to tell him how I felt. I love you, Sven, I whispered to him through lips that suddenly felt cracked and parched. Cy, you better not be dying, he admonished with panic in his eyes. Arms came into view and grabbed him by the neck. Jarek's, my mind said when I saw his dress shirt sleeves. Sven didn't have time to stay with me. He had a big bad vampire to kill. Before Sven was up, his eyes dropped to something next to me. He grabbed it just as he was hauled to his feet. Seconds later, I heard deep screams. Sven. My mind panicked. No, I wanted to scream, not Sven. It couldn't be. Not the only true love I'd ever had. I wanted to get up. I wanted to kill Jarek with my bare hands, but I couldn't. I couldn't even move my limbs. It was then that I realized I was dying. I don't know why it took me so long to realize it, but I knew I was. Just like I knew the sun would rise in Knocknane tomorrow. I wanted to feel something about it, to feel something about the fact that this was it for me, that I was never going to be able to catch a skip again, never going to be able to dance again, never going to be able to see my friends again. But I was too tired to care. Getting me thinking about my friends made me think of the ones I'd left in Knocknane, and then it hit me. Knocknane. The fairies. They were going to be chained into an unending existence of sufferance and torture by Jarek and his cockroaches when this was over. A tear leaked down my face. It seemed so unfair. Nobody deserved this. A huge thud that sounded like a falling tree came from where the screams had been. It wasn't long before a heart dropped inches from my face with a little squish. Blood splattered onto my forehead. I couldn't even begin to care, though. Oh my God, Sven. This wasn't happening. Anguish lanced to my gut. Not Sven, not my love. How could this be happening? We were the good guys, damn it. Weren't the good guys supposed to win? But we weren't. All I could be thankful for is that I was going to die, so I didn't have to think about how his death and the death of all the fairies was my fault. I closed my eyes at the injustice of it. I didn't know how long it had passed, but I felt someone step over me. Then arms were around me. I told you not to die, came a familiar voice. It was Sven. Tears streamed down my face. It couldn't be. He couldn't be alive. My sick mind was imagining him even in my death. Maybe he was my angel coming to take me home. It was said that when you saw angels when you died, but they watched over us always. Strong hands raised my body up. My head jerked back. My hair was caught under something. I couldn't imagine angels would have a corporal form. Okay, maybe he wasn't an angel. Happiness expanded like a sunshine in my chest. I managed to weak, ouch, with a smile, and then said, I'm not dying, I'm going to sleep. Sleep is not a good idea. I don't think you'd wake up, he said as he propped me against the wall. He bent over my neck. With sure movements, he leaned down to lick his tongue over the bite on my neck. I almost said something about now not being the time, but then I felt the warm blood stop seeping. Way to go, Sven. I wanted to tell him how awesome he was, but I was so tired. I laid my head to the side. That was so much better. I was just going to rest. I would tell him when I woke up. Sven didn't seem to like that, though. He shook me. Cy. It's not like I didn't want to respond. I just couldn't. I slit my eyes open to glare at him. The fairies had gathered behind him. Oh, good. They were alive. I managed another smile. Sven took a piece of glass off the floor as he looked at the remaining fairies that were gathered around us. Everyone get out of here. This place is going to collapse. What about Cy? Said one of the smaller fairies in the back. What a sweet voice. What a sweet little fairy. She was going to be so happy back home. I said go, roared Sven. Looking at everyone's face, I could see how torn they were as they stared at me. Pity was on their faces. I wanted to tell them it was okay. Death wasn't so bad. After a nod from Oren, they fled to the passageway out in a cluster. Sven hadn't spared them a glance after his command, though. It must be nice to feel so in control. Instead, he took the glass and slashed it across his wrist. Blood welled up and spilled down his arm. I did a slow blink. That looked painful. I wanted to tell him what an idiot he was to do that, but I couldn't manage to say anything. Drink it. He held it to my lips. An odd coppery smell floated to my nose seconds before the wet touched my lips. If I had energy to be sick, I would have been. No way I was going to drink that. My mouth must have been hanging open because some of it dripped onto my tongue. That had to be damn no way. I moved my tongue. The blood dribbled over my chin. From the anger on Sven's face, he knew I'd done it on purpose. Look, you've lost too much blood. You need to take mine or you're going to die, he said, his voice shaking. It was sweet of him to care about me like this. I wanted to kiss him and tell him thank you. Thank you for caring about me. When I didn't drink, he said, you either drink this or I'm going to let myself bleed out until we're both too weak to move, and then we'll die in this fire laying on each other like a sack of potatoes. That was a low blow. Giving him a glare, I locked my lips around his wrist. That part I had liked. He had such nice arms. The next part wasn't going to be pleasant, though. I sucked. Blood flowed down my throat. I almost did puke then, but I made myself keep going. The taste overwhelmed my senses. I gagged and some shot out my nose. Beautiful. I never let up, though. I kept taking and taking. Before I realized what was happening, I was bent over his arm and had his forearm in my surprisingly strong grip. I didn't know when the tide shifted, but I felt so much better. I loosened my grip. There were white fingerprints where my hands had been. I felt so alive. I could almost feel the blood flowing through my veins. Happiness warmed me. I think it was safe to say I wasn't dying anymore. I stopped sucking and unlatched my mouth. It was harder to break our connection than I thought it would be. My body felt like it was needed to be near him. Okay, that was weird. Stubborn ass, I said as I wiped my mouth. It was hard to be mad at him, though. He had the most ridiculous smile on his face. He scooped me up into his arms and stood up. You better believe it, he said, and planted a quick kiss on my lips. A beam fell to the floor behind us. Let's get you out of here before you get your wish about us dying in this fire, I said, giving his sweaty chest a smack. Still with that silly grin on his face, he was off. His stride surprised me. He ran like a gazelle. He dodged fallen beams and jumped over fiery obstacles like he'd done this 1,000 times. That didn't stem the relief that coursed through me when we finally burst through the entrance doors, though. We'd made it. I almost couldn't believe it. We were a safe distance from the house. When we were a safe distance from the house, he laid me on the grass. I could still feel the heat of the building. It took me a second to realize we weren't by the others. I wanted to make sure they were okay. Where are the other fairies? I asked. Right over there, he said with a nod of his head to the north. I started to get up and he stopped me with a gentle hand on my chest. Look, I love you, he said. Well, that was an odd way to start it, but it was a relief to know he felt the same way I did. My heart welled at his words. My lips quivered as I said, I love you too. Getting the words out was easy, but fighting the tears of happiness and relief from everything that had happened wasn't so easy. Emotion leaked hot from my eyes. He kissed my tears and then kissed me again and said, I'm sorry, but I can't risk losing you again. I can't lose you again either, I started to say. He turned my head to the side as I spoke. The move confused me until he bit me. Arousal hit me like a Mack truck. The sensations that swirled inside me were incredible and overwhelming. I wanted to rub against him like a cat in heat, but why was he biting me? I hadn't told him he could bite me before, and here he was doing it again. That wasn't even any being caught up in the moment either. A little shot of pain interrupted my thoughts. My palms pressed against him as I said, ow! No sooner had the words gotten out than the pleasure came back. I wanted to curl against him, but I didn't. What was going on? I pushed at him again. After a second, he let me go. What in the hell was that? I asked. Then I heard a tiny voice behind us. Cy, thank the gods you're alive. I turned my head to see Kitty flying. A couple members of SAW jogged close behind her. I guess she was bringing reinforcements like Sven had said. Honestly, I hadn't expected her to ever see her again, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't like it. I'd grown kind of attached to her little sarcastic self. Ah, we missed the action, said the petite witch with the green faux hawk. She'd been at my kidnapping. What was her name again? Oh, Mitzi, that's right. The bulk of Worm was right behind her, his arms moving with his walk like a gorilla. Kitty reached us and dropped down to land on my knee. She looked up at me. Her tawny brown head turned as she looked me up and down. You look like shit. I couldn't help but laugh at that. It's nice to see you, too. She giggled. A movement caught her eye, and she flew into the air. I looked, too. The other fairies had decided to join us. They looked out of place, like they didn't know what to do. I can imagine it would be hard to know what to do after more than a century of having your life dictated to you. Instead, Kitty flew to eye level and said, Where did you all come from? In there, Wendy said, pointing to the burning house. No shit, Kitty said with big eyes on the house. The firelight burned golden against her skin. Everyone else was looking at the house, so I did too. When I did, I could tell why everyone had gotten silent. The house was starting to fall in on itself. I wonder how close we'd been to being crushed to death. A shudder went through me. That could have been us way too easily for my comfort. At my shudder, Sven pulled me close. I love you. His face felt good pressed against my hair. I said the only thing I could. I love you too. With a little squeeze, I pulled away with a sigh. I finally felt like I could relax. It was a little unreal that we had made it out, that we were here with each other, with everyone, that all these fairies now had a chance at life again. That brought the sobering thought back that someone would have to bring them to Knocknane. With how my luck was going, that person would be me. I rolled my eyes. My attention went to the forest. I didn't know what brought my eyes there, but it dawned on me that everything wasn't as it should be. I mean, besides the blazing inferno of a house next to us and dozens of homeless fairies that were now under my care, the uneasiness sat in my stomach like bad tuna. Then a wave of darkness that had nothing to do with the night sky pulsed through me. It reached to me from the trees. Then from the edge of the forest, eyes started to appear. I'd seen those eyes before. Once. The eyes were as red as the blood that froze in my veins. One by one, they blinked into existence, like raindrops falling from the sky. After a heartbeat, there was a torrential downpour of eyes until the forest floor was awash in a sea of glowing red. I rose to my feet, never taking my eyes off the evil building a mere 250 feet away. It was too late to leave. I knew it, but I said it anyway. We have to get out of here. Sven turned his head, no doubt to see what I was talking about. He saw the building doom. Well, fuck, he said. With that, a high-pitched scream broke the night. More screams piled on top of it. The pitch rose to an ear-splitting crescendo. I pressed my palms to my ears in a vain attempt to block out some of the sound. I'd seen the sound alone bring victims to their knees, but we couldn't afford that luxury. We had to get out of here. Now, the boogeyman was here, and he was coming for us. Run! I screamed over the noise. The wall tidal waved, breaking free from the edge of the forest in a flood of black bodies that were heading straight for us. That's the end. And I'm sorry about that. But one, I hope you liked it. I really enjoyed writing it. And believe it or not, I had someone comment once on a review that it seemed like the end was rushed. It isn't. Initially, I had ended where everyone was outside of outside of the house, of Jarek's house. But then I decided to make it a series, and I had to end like a little cliffhanger with a cliffhanger. So I hope that's okay and that doesn't bother any of you. Ye Books, I'm so excited. I'm sorry, YS Books. I'm so excited that you're going to go back and see the rest of the story, or read the rest, hear the rest of the story. This is a great time probably to let everybody know that on the 29th of December, I'm going to be re-releasing this book, Gilded Fae. It's currently branded as a different book, which I'm not going to tell you, but you can find if you Google my name and Amazon. But this actually has some developmental edits that, I mean, just a few, not a lot, but enough to where it's making the rest of the arc seamless. Yeah, no problem. I'm so glad you were here. I really hope that you liked it. I want everyone to let me know if they have any questions. Of course, you're always welcome to join me on the Fae Court on Facebook. Again, the series is going to be re-released on the 29th of December. I completed the full series Bible. So it's going to be a 10-book series. And I'm really excited. It did turn out to be an urban fantasy instead of the paranormal romance it was going to be. So that's why I'm rebranding it and re-releasing it. In the power and the vein of re-releasing, I'm actually releasing some shirts too. I had this one made. I hope you love it. This is basically, it's a word cloud, and they have all words of empowerment because my series actually is a 10-step series to becoming completely empowered. And I'm actually going to release YouTube videos along with the message of the book when every book is released. So you can see how the message in the book applies to female empowerment, and how then in turn you can become empowered yourself. And I'll give you steps on how to do that and take you through that journey, so you can kind of go through the journey with like Cy is, so you guys can go with it together. And that's what I mean by my slogan of changing, like stories for today, changing your life for good, because I want to help you in addition to giving you great stories, because I love to write, and self-help is something actually I'm very passionate about, because I wasn't happy for a long time, and it took me maybe about 4 or 5 years to really get to the point where I am now, and I want to share that with everybody. So I had my own journey of empowerment. I want to share that with you, and of course my love for books, which I've wanted to do my whole life. So am I on IG? Ooh. Forgive me, what is IG? That sounds terrible. Instagram? Is that Instagram? Yes, I am. Let's see. It is _ Erica Reader. Also, I have a group on Facebook. It's called you can actually see the link below. I remembered to do that. And we actually do a lot of talking over there. It's a very active group where we chat and we do everything like that. But I am on Instagram. I'd be more than happy to see. I don't know if, I can't look at it right now, the description. I think I have it in the description, but I think I might have also taken some of the links out to not be confusing. But anyway, ericareader.com has all of my tags also for all of my different social media accounts. I would love to see you over there, YS Books. I'd like to ask your name, but I don't know if that's socially acceptable. Yes, Instagram. Yes, I am on Instagram. Don't mind me. I'm not super hip to pretty much anything. But yeah, I'd love to see you over there. And I'd love to interact more with you. I know that Yvette, it's so nice to meet you. I love urban fantasy readers because they all tend to be like me, which is just a little quirky and a little up for adventure and excitement. So that's why I love the idea of the group. But if you have a lot to do, I know what that's like. So feel free just to follow me, and you can see updates and everything. I do have a free book that I'm giving away as like a reader magnet. It's a novella, but it's a free book. It's on Amazon. Actually, it's called The Beast. But if you want to sign up for my newsletter, I will send it to you. So we can do that too. As much as engagement as you want. I'm super excited to be here, and I've been writing for my whole life. So I can't wait to share my stories with you. So I could chat forever, but I'm going to let you go. And Yvette, it was really nice to meet you. Hope you enjoyed the book, and everyone else read. I know a lot of you read this or view this listen to this on replay. So I hope you enjoyed the book as well. And I'm really looking forward to the re-release of everything and the launch of the store with the t-shirts and everything. I can't wait to share that with you. I'm so excited. I've been working really hard, like morning, noon, and night. So I hope you love it like I do. Again, thank you. And it was a pleasure reading this to you. And I hope you enjoyed it too. Bye.